Howdy. There are millions of different ways to improvise music, and in this video I'm going to show you one of the ways that I've found, after playing for 30 years, teaching for, over 20 or whatever, a lot of playing and a lot of teaching. The way that I find to be the easiest. I'm a big fan of getting the most bang for your buck, and I think this is a great way to get a lot of mileage out of learning just a really little bit of knowledge and then just applying it. So, here we go. For this little example, we're going to use the key of G minor, and we're going to do the G minor pentatonic scale. It's a 5-note scale, so it's, less notes to worry about. And what I really like about it is every note sounds great over just about every chord. So you really can't go wrong with the pentatonic scale. That's, one of the reasons why it's loved so much. So the G minor pentatonic scale is G, B flat, C, D, F, and then of course ending it with G. Okay, so what I just played, that little shape, okay, on the lowest string, the low E string, the 6th string, 3rd fret, 6th fret, 3rd fret on the A string, 5th fret on the A string, 3rd fret on the D string, 5th fret on the D string. So I like to look at it like it's a little kind of trapezoid shape. Okay, so first you want to memorize that shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the root again on top. So once we have that shape memorized, little trapezoid, for the key of G, and this is the minor pentatonic shape, so wherever we move it to, it's going to always retain the minor pentatonic shape, just starting on different root notes. So for this we're going to, of course, start on G, for the G minor pentatonic. So the G minor pentatonic shape, starting on the 6th string, is that, and then of course an octave up on the 15th fret. So that's 2 shapes right there. Okay, and all you have to remember is the trapezoid shape and the root note. And hopefully you should know all the notes on the neck by now. If not, get to it. Then on the A string, the G, the root note is at the 10th fret. So again, the trapezoid shape is the same type of a thing. Okay? Then on the D string, the G is at the 5th fret. Okay? So the trapezoid shape. Now on the 2 highest strings, the B and the high E string, they're tuned a fret down. So everything that you play is sort of a fret up, if you kind of think of it like that. So now the trapezoid shape is going to be shift a fret up to get those last 2 notes. Okay? So even though it's a completely different shape, as long as you remember the trapezoid shape and that the last 2 strings are a fret up, then, really everything just falls into place. So, okay, so that's the D string, and then of course you could play it up here too, an octave up. So then on the G, of course, open, okay, but then it's hard to see the trapezoid shape, but once you get the hang of it, you can easily move to the open position there. But if we look at the G here, again the trapezoid shape, but the last 2 strings you have to move up a fret, so both of them are up a fret. Okay, now we're to the very last string. So if we go to the B string though, the G is at the 8th fret. Okay, we can still do the trapezoid shape, we just run out of strings, but we still have 4 notes we can get in there. And then the last 2, of course, we run out of strings. So we end up with, now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 if we count the last one that I just showed you. Different positions, and then of course a couple of octave positions that are fairly easy to get to. So what is that? 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different positions, something like that. And they really span quite a bit of the neck. That's the lowest note that we've talked about. There is, of course, an F that exists in G minor, the pentatonic, but that's now sort of not part of the pattern. So we're really going from staying with the patterns, with that's the lowest note, and then we've gotten up to here. And of course, with some octaves, we could go even higher. So we're really spanning, pretty much the whole entire neck, just with that one shape, starting on the correct root note, which in this case is G, and of course, just remembering that the last two strings are upper fret. Okay, so there we go. So now let's, take a look at stuff. With this pattern, one of the important things that I want you to sort of get a handle on are the notes within the scale. Okay, I like to think of it in terms of numbers or in terms of intervals related to the root note. So in the G minor pentatonic, okay, if you go, like, oh, well, there's a G, there's a B flat, there's a C, and you memorize those notes, the D and the F, then as soon as you go to a different key, A minor, now all of those notes are different. Okay? So I like to think of it in terms of numbers. So with the G minor pentatonic, the root note, of course, is 1. The B flat is the second note in the scale, or the interval of a minor third. So it's the third of the scale of the key. The C is the third note of the scale, and it's the fourth, an interval of a fourth. The D is the fourth note of the scale, an interval of a fifth. And then the F is the fifth note of the scale, and it's an interval of the seventh. It's a minor seventh. So I like to think of it like that. So the root, third, fourth, fifth, seventh, and then of course the root. And the reason I like to do that is you can now take that knowledge, bang for the buck, and move it to other keys. So the key of A, that position, that's still the root, that's still the minor third, the third, that's still the fourth, that's still the fifth, that's still the seventh, and that's still the root again. So everything that you've been doing in G minor now is a very easy switch to A minor, because the numbers are all the same, the position within that little trapezoid shape is all the same, so all of your knowledge can now apply right to a new key. So I really like that approach. And one of the things that I do like to do is to take a certain idea, something like that. So okay, so that's just 3 notes, the fifth, the seventh, and then the root, and exploit that idea. A lot of people, when they start to try to improvise, they think, I have all of these notes at my disposal. I've memorized the pattern, I've memorized where to play them, and now I can go to town. And I always think of it like you're writing something, a novel, a book, a poem, a short story, whatever, and you have a dictionary and it has all these words in it. You don't need to use every single word. You're going to use certain words much more often than other words. So certain notes you'll use more, certain notes you might use less. Whatever, combinations may tend to go hand in hand. Like obviously, certain words, and then the blah blah blah, and then the. That's a very common 3-word pattern that happens in the English language. So don't be afraid to utilize certain notes that seem to just flow together. That's part of what's going to be your style. Don't feel like you need to, like, well, I'm playing down here and I haven't played up here for a while, so now I'm going to jump up here. Like, oh, don't forget down there again. Just play whatever you think. Start really simple. So with that little idea, I had an extra note in there, but you get the idea. I'm just taking that little idea and exploiting it and really kind of stretching it. And of course, shameless plug, I have this awesome book, 50 Totally Awesome Guitar Licks by Joe Hart, with a great picture of me on it. Woohoo! And what this does is it shows you at the beginning how to take a lick and change it and morph it and come up with a whole lot of different ideas just out of one basic idea that you start with. And then it goes through and gives you 50 licks that you can then use the concepts at the beginning of the book and, you know, come up with just dozens upon dozens upon dozens of ideas. So it's a great book. But anyway, let's go on to jamming a little bit. Okay, so I have this great backing track that I uploaded onto YouTube. I have a whole ton of them, so check them out. And what I'm going to do is play again in G minor. And what you can do is you can take that pattern, and here's how you can really easily kind of flow it together. So this is the pattern at the 3rd fret of the low E string. And then if we take that note we just ended on, which is the root, and do the next pattern, remember that for the last 2 strings it goes up a fret. So now we ended on a root again, and we can do that sort of half of a pattern that I just showed you. So now that's... So that gives you, you know, a lot of territory to kind of mess around with. And let's take a listen and see what we can come up with. This is just a basic 12-bar blues, so it makes it easy, very predictable. So right there, let me stop that for a sec. Right there, I really made use of the root notes of the chord change and using the 5th, which is, you know, like I showed you earlier, part of that pattern, the 5th, the 4th, and then the root again. So that makes it really go along with the backing track. And of course, the whole point of, you know, improvising and all of that is to come up with stuff that sounds good. And if you are hitting chord tones as chords are changing, that usually tends to sound pretty good. So you don't have to do it, obviously, every single time. That could actually start to sound a little kind of contrived, a little boring. But you can certainly do it, you know, sprinkled throughout and whatever. But having the ability to do that is just of such great importance that I really, really advise you to go through and just know where the root is, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the seventh, and then of course the root again at the top. And when you know the chord changes, then you can start exploiting some of those notes. And not just the root notes. You know, with the, say, root chord, the E minor, the fifth and the third are all part of that chord. You know, so you have options to hit chord tones other than just the root. So, you know, go at it and have fun, and hope this helped.